Okay, boys and girls, here is part 2 of chapter 9. Remember, I split it in half because it's such a long chapter. So here we go. Some things are better left alone, said Lil. And that brings us to Fang. Fang has lived here since Vannaby moved in. She found him in the yard and put him in a cage her very first day. Fang doesn't talk much, so I'll tell you a bit about him. His cage is on the floor in the corner. It's the biggest cage in the cottage, but it's not nearly big enough for Fang. He was a large snake when he got here, and he's grown since then. A snake, I thought. Even if it wasn't a cage, the thought of a snake in the room made my heart beat faster and my skin feel cold and clammy. It's our turn, breathed one of the spiders. I want to hear how the two frogs were enchanted. Go ahead, princess, squeaked a mouse. Tell us how you became a frog. With a snake in the room, all I wanted to do was hide, but it seemed only fair that I answer. I swallowed hard and tried to speak normally. Actually, I began, it was Edric who became a frog first. He said something to a witch that she didn't like, and she turned him into a frog. Then when I kissed him, so he would turn back into a prince, I turned into a frog too. When we first saw Vannaby, we thought she was the witch who did it, but it wasn't her at all. Are you kidding? Said Lil. Vannaby couldn't turn a cabbage into coleslaw. She's trying to be a witch, but she doesn't have the knack for it. If she's not a witch, what does she want with Edric and me? What is she going to do with those plants she found? I'll tell you if you really want to know, said the bat. She'd be the one to tell, whispered the spider in a voice so soft I might have imagined it. Lil Stinker has lived here most of her life. She's tied to that rafter with a piece of twine. It's too short to reach any of the cages, or one of us would have helped her untie it a long time ago. I've seen her try many a time, but that knot lasts like iron. I wish I could get up there to see what kind of knot the old witch used. Mo's very interested in knots. Eenie and I like to try different designs in our webs, but our brother has made knots his entire life. You can see some of our handiwork in the broom against the back wall. Eenie, Miny, and Mo and I did it before the witch caught us. I'm sure you're very talented, I said. If you are all finished talking, I can tell you about Vannaby now. I refuse to try to speak over your cackling. Lil glared at each of the cages before swinging around to face me. I'm going to have to give you a little history first. Vannaby has lived here for about a year. I'm the only one who's been here longer than that. I used to live here with the old witch, Moodine. She was a nice old lady, although kind of crazy toward the end. Hardly anybody came by because she didn't like company, and she made people feel uncomfortable. She had made me live with her only because she didn't like bugs. The old woman thought cleaning was a waste of time, so there was plenty of bugs, and I was here to eat them. Lil sighed and rearranged her wings. Those were the good old days. The witch could do real magic, and some days this place was hoppin'. But Moodine was old even when I first came to live with her, and her health wasn't good. Then she got sick, and she couldn't take care of the animals anymore, so she let them all out of their cages. By then, she was too weak to undo my twine, so I was still here when she lay down on her bed and disappeared in a puff of smoke. We'd known that a young woman from one of the farms had been snooping around for some time. We didn't let on, but we knew. The day the old witch vanished, Vannaby took the place over. The puff of smoke was still fogging up the room when the woman barged in and made herself at home. As far as I can tell, she hasn't even a hint of magic in her. Her only claim to fame is that she can read, which I admit is an accomplishment in itself. Why, these days, the best witches are the ones with the talent who can also read. You have to read old spells, you see. Passing them down by word of mouth can be a bit shaky. People forget things, mispronounce a word or two. Who knows what can happen then? Anyway, Vannaby really wants to be a witch, but it takes more than just wanting. You have to have some talent, or you can do only the simplest spells, the kind you just read from a book. Vannaby's not interested in the basic spells. She's got it in her mind that to be a real witch, she has to do big, showy magic, the kind that would impress lots of people. So she doesn't realize that little magic is powerful too. But if she doesn't have the ability to do magic, why is she here? I can't answer that one. Maybe she doesn't realize she can't do it yet. Maybe she's too stubborn to give up. Or maybe her life on the farm was so bad, she'd rather be here. What is she looking for now? I asked. She has some idea about trying one of Mudine's fancier spells, said Lil. The spell requires some unusual ingredients, like the dragon's breath on the shelf next to you. See it there? It's the pretty bottle with the swirly colors. It was part of Mudine's collection. Vannaby would never have gotten it on her own. What is the spell for? Nothing unusual. She thinks it'll give her everlasting youth and beauty. These things usually backfire, but there's no telling her that. Tell the frog about the rest of the ingredients. The voice was dry and raspy. Just hearing it made my skin crawl. The snake, I thought, shuddering. Oh yeah, said Lil. Aside from some rare plants, all she needed were the tongues and the toes of talking frogs. She has plans for you and your friend. Your fate was sealed as soon as she heard you talk. That's why she wanted to keep you calm. She wouldn't want you to damage those precious tongues and those toes when she was about to use them. Our tongues and toes? She wouldn't listen when we tried to tell her that we aren't really frogs. I even told her that my parents would reward her, but it didn't make any difference. Of course not. If you were humans, you wouldn't be any of use to her. She needs talking frogs to make her spell work. No gold or jewels will get her what she wants. Only the right ingredients could do that, and that includes you, or at least parts of you. What are we going to do? Hope that she doesn't find the plants she's looking for. She can't do the spell without them. You really do know everything that goes on around here, I said. I should. I've been here the longest, and I can see just about everything from my rafter, Lily said proudly. Wind blew through the cracks in the shutters, sending dust and scraps of litter swirling around the cottage. The room grew dark, and rain pattered on the roof. It lasted only a few seconds, then abruptly stopped. The wind blew again, and I coughed at the swirling dust. When the rain came in earnest, it was heavier and louder than before. A steady drizzle fell through a dozen holes in the roof, leaving damp spots on the table and floor. Lil edged along her rafter, avoiding the worst of the leaks. Everyone had grown quiet when the rain began, lulled by the steady drumming. Although the sound was soothing, I was unable to relax, for I had begun to feel a prickling down my spine as if somebody was watching me. Certain that I would have noticed Vannaby's return, I glanced over my shoulder. At first I thought no one was there, but then I noticed the jar of eyeballs. Every one was focused on me. It made me feel the way I had on rare occasion that my father had me sit beside him on the raised dais at the throne room while he received petitioners. Courtiers and commoners alike had stared at me as if hoping I'd make a fool of myself so they'd have something to talk about later. I hated the feeling then, and I hated it even more now. These days were unsettling even when they weren't looking at me. I tried to ignore them, but it was nearly impossible. In a way, it was almost a relief when the door squeaked on its ancient hinges and Vannaby stalked into the room. All the eyes turned to watch her. Tossing her dripping sack on the table, she hurried to light the lantern. I crouched down and pretended to be asleep, but my heart began to race when the witch walked toward my shelf. This is it, I thought. If anyone had ever told me that I'd end up as a frog used in a witch's spell, I would have sworn he was crazy. But now, the witch stopped beside my cage, and I held my breath. I was positive that I was about to lose some of my favorite body parts, until I realized that Vannaby was looking through the pile of books and not at me. It's somewhere in one of these, Vannaby muttered to herself. The old woman kept good records. I'm sure she wrote about the plants I need. She took the dragon's skull from the pile of books and set it aside, then selected some books and carried them to the table. A few minutes later she was back, shuffling through the books again. Each time the witch approached our cage, I pretended to be asleep. I opened my eyes only when I was sure she was looking the other way, and then I opened them only a little. I was glad of this next time she passed by, for she paused by our cage to look at us. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel the woman's eyes boring into me. The frog's tongue and toads can wait until I'm about to start, Vannaby decided after a long silence. They'll be more potent if they're nice and fresh. I heard her move onto the books and look them over one more time. A chill crept through me, and I fought to keep it from showing. Vannaby selected a book and returned to the table. The room grew quiet, and although I knew she was lost in her studies, I was too scared to open my eyes. Tongues and toes, I thought. She's going to take our tongues and toes. Even if she doesn't kill us, we'll be maimed for the rest of our lives. What are we going to do? It was late by the time Vannaby found the book that she needed. Musty and yellowing with age, it contained notes written years before by the old witch. Vanity pored over the pictures, looking for the plants named in the spell. Found it, she said at last. But according to this, I need the stems, not the leaves. Good, she said, yawning. I'll get them first thing in the morning. Tomorrow is the big day. Still studying the drawing, the witch fell asleep with the book clutched in her hands. When I was sure that Barnaby was asleep, I hurried to Edric's side and shook him as hard as I could. Edric, I whispered in his eardrum, we have to think of something. We have to get out of here tonight. She's going to cut our tongue tomorrow. She's going to cut off our toes. Please, Edric, you have to wake up. Edric groaned and raised his head to look at me through heavily lidded eyes. Leave me alone, Emma, he said. I'm too tired to talk. You're awake, Edric, you're awake. Edric's head sank down into his arm. I grabbed his shoulders in desperation and shook him. We have to talk now, Edric. We only have until tomorrow morning. Edric began to snore. I sank to the floor of the cage in despair. What am I going to do, I thought, for the 100th time that day. Fat tears rolled down my cheeks and plopped onto the bottom of the cage. Hey, it's not that bad, Lil said from a rafter. If he woke up enough to talk, you'll probably be able to wake him up completely in the morning. Leave him alone and get some rest yourself. You're going to need it tomorrow. I can't sleep, Lil. I'm too scared, I protested. And even if I could, this itchy rash is driving me crazy. A rash, huh? I can't keep you from being afraid, but I may know a remedy for that rash. We'll need light for it, though, so we'll see about it tomorrow. Now relax and try to sleep. Nothing is hopeless, at least not yet.